Hey everyone, it's Andy from Be Kind Homestead here. Today I'm going to be sharing a video all about how I am trying to start seeds inside this year. I'm going to be going all the way through mixing my own potting soil. Before I get into the actual nuts and bolts of how I mix the soil and start the seeds and all of that, I thought it was important to talk about the setup that I have here. I have a 4x4 grow tent that is in my basement. It's a little bit cooler down here, so I kind of need that because it helps me to keep the temperature up, and it keeps an enclosed environment. It keeps the light in, it keeps the humidity in, it keeps a lot of the good things that I want in there. At the same time, there are risks with that same enclosed environment. I have to be careful with airflow and how warm and moist it is in there, because that can also promote other things like moss and molds and fungus gnats in the soil and things like that. Is a grow tent 100% necessary? Absolutely not. No, it's not. As far as the lighting goes, this one is always a highly contested issue with how much should I have, and my best answer is there is no such thing as too much. When you're thinking of lighting plants and growing them inside, you're competing with the sun. There's no competition. You're not gonna have enough lights in there that it's gonna be more light than it's gonna get outside from the sun. It's just not gonna happen. The main thing is to have enough light so that the plants can develop full and lush. And the easiest way that you can know if you're getting enough light, especially when starting seeds, is the first sign is by how high they sprout before they fire off those first two dew leaves. If you have seedlings that are starting to sprout because the temperature is there and the moisture is there, but they're growing 3 to 4 inches and those dew leaves don't seem to want to open up, you don't have enough light. It's just like if you've ever lifted up weed blocker or a piece of cardboard that's sat in your grass for a long time, and you look underneath, you can see white plants growing out to the side. That's because they're trying to get more sunlight. Well, if they're not getting enough sunlight above or grow light from above, they'll do the same thing. They'll just grow up white and spindly, and you'll get these leaves that kind of pop out way later than they should. So that's the first sign that you need more light, and not just a longer duration. You need more lights, period. The next important piece of my setup that I have, and one that honestly took a little while for me to realize just how important it was heat mats for seeds. Now, mind you, if you don't use any heat mats, there is still a good chance that you're going to get a whole lot of good germination, and I mean, some you won't, depending on whether they can tolerate it or not. But at the same time, if you're investing the time, the space, and all of that into starting your own seeds or anything, you may as well get a heat mat or two. They're not the most expensive, but one thing I will say I was apprehensive about getting was heat mats, but they're absolutely worth it. When you do get them, a lot of the time I've gotten seed packs that say seedlings will emerge in 21 days and they come out in 4. It makes a huge difference on the amount of germination you'll get. So I do definitely recommend that as well. The last thing that I always have running in my tent in some form or fashion is a fan. In the beginning stages, even when I have nothing but humidity domes in there, I still have a fan in there, going back mostly to the point of I don't want it to be a petri dish in there. So I will keep the air flowing and circulating, and my tent's not airtight, and I don't want it to be. I do want some air to be able to circulate in and out of it. If I do notice it's getting kind of soupy and really damp along the walls, I will run the fan with the door to the tent open for a while and just dry it out a little bit. So that's about all the components that I have for my grow setup. Especially when you're first starting seeds, it is the time when the setup itself can be the least important, believe it or not, because as long as you have moisture and warmth, they're going to germinate. A lot of them. Very few need light to germinate, but even if they do, you can put them under a fluorescent bulb that's 40 watts and they'll germinate. They need very little to get going. Most of that energy is already stored in the seed. One thing that I do want to address as far as growing indoors and in a tent, I know a lot of folks out there are probably watching this video to grow tomatoes and grow veggies and things like that, and I'm going to tell you this system works for all of it. One thing that I will say, and this is purely based on my experience, is if you are thinking about starting seeds in a windowsill, you have to be careful. Every time that I have done it, the plants tend to kind of grow sideways towards the window, and I mean, you can turn them, you can do whatever you want, but again, that's part of that. You can't really compete with the sun. Mind you, I have tried to grow in windowsills and put a grow light also directly above the plants, and it didn't matter. It's still, unless the grow light itself was blocking the sun, then the plant still grew towards the windows. So just in my personal experience, I leave the sun out of it until it's actually time to put them outside. As far as time goes, I usually start out at 6 to 7 hours. You wanna, when you're timing and saying how long should my lights go for, you want the seeds to think it's early in the season. As they grow and mature, I'll increase it by a half an hour, probably every 2 to 3 weeks, just because it's gonna make them think that the days are getting longer, we're getting towards summer. I mix my own seed starting and potting soil, so if you're doing this yourself, I usually go with about a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts peat to 1 part horticultural perlite. If you buy your own potting soil, you're still going to want to kind of dump it out in a bin, and there's a few reasons why. The first one is, even though I have to mix this bin, I have to mix all of this stuff together, I'm still going to want to, even if this was pre-mixed, I still want to go through it and just check for these clumps, especially when you're starting seeds. You want really good contact with the seeds in the ground or the soil. So you want to go through that and work that out anyway. So I'll start mixing these together. But as I'm doing that, I'll kind of like rub my hands together too, and just the clumps like that, I just want to break those down. Get everything all mixed around. If you're debating whether or not you want to try buying the stuff and mixing it yourself, I'll tell you it's a lot cheaper. I got a 2-yard compressed bale of peat for about $26, and 30 quarts of perlite for about the same. And I'm almost done the first bale of peat, and I got plenty left that I can use. I mean, it's certainly, you're looking at more than a 50% price cut, because potting soil is very expensive, and a lot of it is just this manual step. And a lot of the times, if you notice, you get really cheaper potting soil, because I'm a cheapskate too. You'll notice there'll be a lot of clump stuff in it, and it's not helpful for seed starting. So it's really good, even if you buy bagged seed starter or potting soil, just to go through it like this, and just get all these peaty clumps broken up. Which I'm looking like I'm almost there, and hit these corners. But you can kind of see, it's a relatively simple step to save a ton of money, and that is really looking like the stuff you buy in a store. Let's get some sticks out. Usually there's a couple of clumps. This batch is pretty good. There's not a whole lot, but you get stuff like that where it's kind of a tougher clump. I'll just check it. Usually get it out of the way. So, again, if you bought it, you don't have to do all this, but if you do, mix it yourself, 2 parts to 1, 2 parts peat, 1 part perlite for seed starting. Go through it well. And the second thing, if you don't mix your own, especially with seed starting, but you always want to do this when you're using new potting soil, is add moisture. Because if you've ever dealt with potting soil a lot and you've ever let it dry out all the way, unfortunately, you know it's not taking much water back in. And with this bucket right here, I'm actually going to use a lot of this. Just watch. Now it may look like I'm super soaking it, but it's gonna sop up very quickly. Kind of swirl it around. See, it's already kind of gone. I can feel a little bit of moisture in here, but not a lot. So I just wanted to show you guys. I mean, it's all gone already. So really, now I'm not going to mess around. It may look like a lot, but it'll go. Half a gallon, a little bit more. Give it the old stir around.
See, you'll kind of see a little bit of water pooling at the bottom still. That'll be going very quickly. I'm a little bit picky, so I'm going to water it a little more. So I see, like this underneath stuff is kind of like, if you can squeeze water out, that's going to be too much. So I'll just keep stirring that around. Slide my bin around all over the place. But that's starting to get there. I'm actually pretty good with that. Realistically, whatever you use for seed starter as far as a container is really up to you. I've got a bunch of these little plastic pods that I love. You can be careful with them. The plants are small enough. I mean, I'll reuse these 30, 40 times before any of them even crack. To fill them, I usually just take a mounding heap like that, and just kind of press down, and then just thumb off the excess. That's about it. I'm just going to have to do that about 50 to 60 times here. So I'll do another one real quick. Mound it up, give it a press, and just thumb that stuff right off the top. Now, since these are going to be in here such a short time, I'm not going to be so picky about packing soil, and you don't want to pack it insanely hard, nothing like that, but at the same time, you don't want a whole lot of air in there. So that's it. Give it a good push. Thumb off the excess. That's it. There you go. So I'm going to do the 150 so pods that I have to do, and then I'll get through that boring part and get back to you guys. Okay, so I got my billion pods filled up. I figured I'd just go through, show you guys what I use for seed starting, pretty much universally. So I like to use a separate pod that it itself can drain. Obviously the seed's going to sit up here, but I want a pod that can drain, and I want a solid bowl underneath, and that'll all make sense later, but it's for underwatering. And I want a self-contained dome too, and that's just to lock the moisture in for each thing. I have this one. I have two different styles going on today. So I have that one, and then I have the old conventional big old tray with this self-containing cover that I definitely need to clean. But either way, that's what I'm looking for. I want a solid bottom. I want an own dome per tray, and I want the cups themselves to drain. Now again, I'm not going to bore you guys with putting in all of these seeds and all of that fun work, because the point so much today isn't about what I'm growing as much as the process of how I'm doing it inside. So the last step, of course, is to get the seeds in the tent and ready to go. There's a few major points here that I'd like to emphasize as lessons that I learned the hard way. The first one being heat. Now I do have heat mats underneath these trays that are set to 75 degrees. The reason that's important is a few things. A lot of seeds like warm soil to start in, but also because I'm underwatering a lot of these seed trays to keep this humidity in here so I don't have to check it every day. The heat pads will help the humidity and moisture rise up through these pods and make sure that these seeds don't dry out, which is never a good thing once they've started. The second thing that I do that I don't have running right now because it's probably bad enough in the audio with no microphone in this is I always have a fan running in here just to circulate the air and stop it from becoming a mossy dead space. That's why a lot of these are domed in their own personal cover, because if these sprout and these don't, I want to be able to take this cover off of these but still leave these maintained in the dome. So that's why a lot of the time I like to break up each dome per plant that I'm growing. But really at this point the most important thing is keep them moist, keep them warm, keep them happy for now. Hey, so how's it going out there, YouTube universe? It's about 3 days now since I put these seed trays in here and kept them all warm, and I'm actually already getting some sprouts. I've actually got a lupin right there. There's another one in the back corner right here. And right here. I've got an Elysium. I'm also starting to see some other little little bits. These are the other Elysium tray. At this point, I'm going to look underneath here and see, and there's not a whole lot of water under there. Still a little bit of dampness. But that one still has a decent amount of water in there. Like that's what I'm looking for. That's okay to go another day, no problem. That's muddy, that's okay. That is dry. So this one I'm going to want to top off with some water today. And that's all I'm looking for in the beginning when they first sprout. Is that one's iffy. That one could use a little bit. And that one's iffy. So I'm going to get the water. Okay, so now I got my water. And I just want to fill in the bottom again. Just enough to cover it over. Just the slots in the bottom of these trays. Maybe about some half-inch of water right around there, just enough that again the heating mat's underneath. I'm going to evaporate all this water inside. I like doing it underneath like this even from the beginning, because even watering on the top you can disturb the plants, and if you've grown anything indoors you can even just water them and they'll just flop over. So I do like to try to leave them alone to do their thing and get rooting as much as possible in this early of a stage. I don't have to bother them at all. I don't do it. So now I've got my domes back on there. You can see there's some moisture accumulated on there. This one's looking a little dry, but I got water back underneath there. So got some moisture on it. One thing I did want to mention as far as the timing goes for the lighting and the seed mats, I do have my lights on a timer to turn on and off during the day. I do leave the seed heating mat on 24/7 though. It's set at its own temperature that it turns on and off as it needs to, so I don't ever turn those on. I turn those off. I leave those on overnight all the time as need be. As these continue to sprout and as we move on to the next step, I'll update another video, but as for now we're starting to get some sprouting, which is the best first sign. Always feels good. Check back soon. How we doing out there, YouTube? It's day 6 and I've definitely got some sprouting. See if I can get this focused better than last time. But I've got this tray of mums are up here sprouting. Still water underneath, so that's okay. I've got 2 trays of Elysium over here. There's a lot of sprouting going on. Same thing, there's water under there. Water under there. I'll check the lupins. Lupins are probably good for a day, but I've got lupins sprouting over here too. Good thing I noticed is that these first sets of dew leaves are opening nice and close to the soil on the lupins, and that's a good indicator that they're getting enough light right here, which is great. At this point, I'm going to keep the humidity domes on these because I want to wait until those first dew leaves really get sprouted, and I don't want the roots and everything to dry out as soon as these things start sprouting. So at least for 2 or 3 more days depending, I'll check back and I'll let you guys know when these domes finally do stay off for good, because that's usually the first step in hardening that I take. But for now I'm just going to leave them as be, just hope that more sprout, and let these ones that have sprouted get rooted in there much better and ready to move on. Be back in a couple of days and give you guys another update. Morning, YouTube. It is day 10 and it is final results day. As you can see, got some good sprouting across the board here. My mom's in the front, sprouting well. Verbascum are small slowing ones, but they're sprouting. Got a whole bunch of foxglove over here. 2 trays of Elysium are doing great. And the lupins are doing great. So at this point, I'm going to start really taking care to let them dry out a little bit. I'm going to treat them a lot more like plants than seeds, so I don't want to keep them super moist as much. I want to start watering on the top. I'm going to have follow-up videos on the process and how I do it from here, but I feel like this is probably a good time to cut it as far as the seed starting goes. I certainly hope this was helpful. If it was helpful to you at all, please feel free to drop a comment below, because I love reading that stuff. And have a good one, YouTube, and happy growing.